Good morning, Milwaukee. Bobby Tanzillo from OnMilwaukee here. I'm on Mason and Water Street downtown. I'm going to walk along Water Street to the north, maybe detour onto Edison Street. As long as I'm not near any people, like now, I might take my mask off so you can hear me better. But I'm going to turn the camera around as always. I'm starting here. This is the OnMilwaukee World Headquarters, 735 North Water Street, one of the few buildings designed by Chicago's famous Daniel Burnham, architect, massive influence on the 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago, did a whole downtown plan for Chicago, 1909, did this building in 1912, did a few others, the Gimbel's building downtown, across the river, and the small industrial building that is now home to Stone Creek Coffee's Roastery on 5th Street, just north of St. Paul, or some of his others. We're looking north here. I'm on Mason right now, so it'll be a little quieter. But I'm going to show you that building first, because that is the old Miller Cafe, an old Miller Tide House that was pretty amazing. Had a beautiful turret and some other decorations, bay windows, that were all kind of quickly removed. I wrote an article about that. It's got some vintage photos so you can see how that originally looked. And the architects of that building liked it so much that they actually had their office up there on the second floor. Most recently that was home to Angry Taco, but it's not there anymore. Because I'm going to walk up Front Street, I'm going to talk about those two BMO towers, the brand new one to the left and the one on the right, which is going to it's just being renovated. There's going to be a Fiddleheads coffee shop in the connector between those two buildings. It's close to opening, I hear. It'll be the first Fiddleheads in downtown Milwaukee. That building, that block, that stretch of Water Street from Mason to Wells, packed with interesting history. When I wrote about the two BMO towers, I wrote about a lot of that history because it's really interesting stuff, so you might want to check that out. Before we go, I want to point out one of Milwaukee's earliest parking structures, that beautiful Art Deco building designed by Martin Tolgren with a really lovely stylized, I'm going to see if I can zoom into them, those sunflowers. See those? Aren't those awesome? That used to be the site of the Kirby Hotel, which was kind of a Milwaukee landmark until this was built around 1930. I think the Kirby was torn down in 1929. So we're going this way toward the river to Front Street, which these days runs one block. I guess every day has run one block. But I want to go down here because next week I have a story about a series of speakeasies, taverns, saloons, jazz clubs, rock and roll clubs that used to occupy some spaces down here. It took a lot of research to work this out, the exact location and whatnot, but behind this minivan is the entrance to one of the places called the Tunnel Inn. That was the way in, and then when you went inside, there was a room there, and then you could go through an opening which would bring you to a room here underneath Waterfront Deli, and then later in its life another room was added here in this building, and apparently all traces are gone. Jerry Pandel, when he bought this building to open Waterfront Deli, told me that there were still a stage and a pole and some other remnants in his basement, but those are gone. So yeah, that's a super interesting story, I like to think. I hope I did a good job walking through the history of that. You'll be able to find that on Milwaukee at starting around 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. So here's Front Street, which was a riverfront street when it was first named in the 1850s, I believe. That's because buildings like this were not here yet. So this actually did, you could actually walk right to the river from here. Of course, as we go up this way, you'll see probably the most famous Front Street business, which is in this old Meineke Toy Company building. It is called the Safe House, and it opened in 1966. So you can see that gives you kind of a glimpse. It used to lead right to the river. This whole section used to be open to the river, which is why it was called Front Street. So before 1966, though, this was home to the Tunnel Inn, which was a jazz club that got its start back in the buildings I was just telling you about. So there's a connection. And then actually one of the guys that opened the Safe House in 66 was also involved in another club that was in the other buildings I just showed you. So lots of interesting history there. A couple of years ago I wrote a thing. I was looking out our office window down onto Front Street here. Maybe Carolyn can find the link. I neglected to send it to her in advance. But my theory has always been that much like Rue Claire in Paris, or a street like that, which is a busy kind of market and retail, bars, restaurants, that kind of thing. Little street, just runs a few blocks. But this could be a perfect place to do such a thing. You could have stalls, you could have, you know, places that open up onto the street. It could be open in the morning for service, or it could be open to the garages. You know, we could be flexible, but this definitely seems like the kind of street where that kind of action could become a reality. Great little street, leads right to the Pabst Theater. One of the earliest urban spelunking stories I did was a behind-the-scenes look at the Pabst. And actually, even earlier than that, Molly Snyder and I went up to the very top of City Hall. And if you see right where those openings are, up there, can you see those little windows? We went all the way up there, which is pretty cool. Oh, sorry, I turned your back at me. You don't want to see me. All right, here we go. Oh, also yesterday, the day before, I wrote a story about, you see those terracotta decorations up on the top? I'm going to cross the street first. A lot of the original ones were removed when they did restoration work on City Hall about 12 or 15 years ago. And some of those pieces were sold. I did a story about that because one of them is for sale at the moment on Facebook. You can see those up there. And actually there's a picture of one of the lions that's in a West Side neighborhood front yard, and you can see the lions, two of the lions right there, just on either side of the bottom of the clock there. Anyhow, I'm going to try and get us back to normal size. Oh, and I turned me around again. Sorry, my phone is not acting like it normally does. As you can see, downtown's kind of dead at the moment. COVID has many offices closed and people working from home. But recently the St. Kate Hotel reopened, and that's over here on the left. We've done a bunch of articles about that. I wrote about when they were installing the artwork. It's an arts hotel, arts-focused hotel, so there's an art gallery in there, lots of sculptures, there's artwork in the rooms. Some of the rooms were actually entirely decorated by a specific artist, so that's pretty cool. I think Carolyn maybe can share the link to that. There's Proof Pizza in the lobby. Very good Neapolitan style wood-fired pizza. Though not VPN, not official Neapolitan, but and in advance of getting to Edison Street, I'm just going to point out that over there where the slice of ice is, the skating rink, is where Miss Kitty Williams had her house of ill repute. But it was that oddest of things, a sort of respected house of ill repute. It was sort of a quote-unquote high-class house. And that will come up again when we get to Edison Street, so remember that. It's where the slice of ice is. It was facing State Street. All right, Marcus Center. As much as we might love that sunshine, I have to say I do regret the loss of the chestnut grove that was there. I'm very sorry to see that. I will be happy to see this place come back to life though, the outdoor stage, all of the exciting stuff that goes on inside the building. It'll be nice to see that back. Slice of Ice has been open this year, I believe. We did not come down this year for the first time in a long time. For obvious reasons. If you see over there, that tan-colored low brick building over there, that was the old Blatz Bottling Center. I did a walk through the Blatz Brewery once a couple months ago, probably just before things got insanely cold. It was chilly, but not that cold. All right, I'm going to veer off here because I'm going to go to Edison Street, sorry. Another short street. This one a few blocks long, a little longer than Front Street. And one that used to originally also basically front right onto the river before a lot of the stuff on the west side of the street was built. There used to be sort of an open industrial stuff there, like lumber yards, I think a coal yard maybe, that kind of thing. And interestingly, I think if you look at really old maps of Milwaukee, like Increase Lapham's map from the 1870s, early 1870s maybe, you can see that the Milwaukee River used to have a couple of little islands in it. And it looks like one of the islands was here, so that actually Edison Street, or kind of just maybe where the sidewalk is, was actually a channel of water that was later filled in. So this has been sort of an endless ongoing discussion, what to do about this Marcus Center parking structure. There's been talk of a variety of different developments on this. This is not an especially good use of this square block. It would be nice if they could do something a little more attractive and useful, money generating, that could also include parking underground or above ground, but some other things as well. Rohan and Mulaney, that's been there forever. Nice bridge, which was a great idea. This footbridge over to King Drive over the river. So Edison Street, you know, by the 1890s, David Rose was mayor of Milwaukee, and he was sort of a wide open kind of guy, all about red light districts and saloons and all sorts of things that provided nightlife and drama to Milwaukee. And Edison Street became sort of a center of that activity. There were lots of houses of ill repute, unruly houses, if you will. And he was elected mayor at least 4 times. And so during his reign, which sort of straddled the dawn of the 20th century, there was a lot of that kind of activity here on Edison Street, which you wouldn't know today from its quiet aspect. But then by 1910, Emil Seidel was elected, one of the socialists who, you know, the sewer socialists wanted to bring back clean government and clean up the city, and he put an end to the Edison Street stuff. You know what, I'm going to keep going this way, and then I'll loop around. We're here at Highland. There's Vagabond, which appears to be open, although Water Street Brewery downtown is not yet reopened. The suburban ones have reopened, but downtown, I believe, is not yet reopened. Matt Schmidt can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're headed north here. I'm going to turn on Juneau. And actually, I'm going to say, as we near the Harp on the left, I wrote a story once about the history of the Harp and Jo Dolan, the woman who ran the Harp. She was quite a character, beloved in town, with the everyman as well as with politicians and celebrities. And I'm going to mention that because we're also near the Trinity Three Irish Pubs, and say that on Monday I'll have a guide to St. Patrick's Day events coming. So look for that Monday morning at OnMilwaukee. Some of these events will be at the Harp over there. This, of course, not the original location of the Harp. If you read my story, hopefully Carolyn can post that. You will see the original location of the Harp. Trinity Three Irish Pubs also has some stuff going on for St. Patrick's Day this year. Please be safe, people. Masks, social distance. Be outside if you can. There's Mojo Milwaukee, opened in the old Rogues Gallery. They were hoping to open last weekend. I'm not sure if they did or not. But there's an article about that on OnMilwaukee. You can read that. Check their Facebook page too to see if they've opened. All right. So Water Street, of course, for many decades, even in the 19th century, was really a popular place for saloons and bars and restaurants. And if you open up a city directory from the late part of the 19th century or the early part of the 20th century, there are just dozens and dozens and dozens of these kinds of businesses in the neighborhood. You can see, of course, it's still that, believe it or not, as bustling and crazy as Water Street can get in terms of taverns and restaurants in the last few decades. I don't think it's nothing like it was a century or more ago. Well, definitely more than a century ago, because a century ago was Prohibition. So theoretically, and I say theoretically, none of these places were serving alcohol. But again, that's theoretical. I'm going to the east side of the street here because the best looking architecture is on the west side of the street, so we can see it from here. This is an MSOE building. I think it was built as a hotel, but it never got finished, or as apartments, it never got finished, so MSOE ended up buying it and turning it into dorms. So there's some beautiful buildings over there, and I'm going to try and zoom in. I'm struggling with my zoom, I'm sorry. But that Brothers Bar and Grill there, let's see if I can do that. Oh yeah, there we go. Those are two of the best looking buildings on the street, I think, if you ask me. Beautiful. All right. Some great ones all along here. That Weisel one over there, also one of my favorites, with the green cornice there next to the sort of modern looking one and between the tall one. The 4-story one. That 4-story one used to have a Mainstream Records in it in the 80s, early 90s maybe. And Milwaukee jazz radio legend Ron Cuzner had a jazz record shop in there around the same time. Here's Low Country, former Bar Louie. This is third location of the Chicago restaurant owned by a husband and wife team. And this is a seafood boil kind of place, just opened. After having been in the works since last summer, I went in there in September. Took a ton of pictures so you could see what it would look like. It was basically built out at that point. They were just waiting for licensing, and I think they were just trying to kind of see how the things would pan out with the pandemic and limitations there. There's Elwood's, the other side of Water Street Brewery. I wrote what I think was a really fun urban spelunking story about Water Street Brewery as well. That's long been home to taverns and saloons going back a very long time. Some of them busted as being houses of ill repute. There's the other side of that Marcus Center parking structure. You see what I mean in terms of use of that site. It's basically a dead block to the sidewalk. But here's where a Low Country can start to social distance once it gets a little bit warmer, and they can put tables out here. Be a nice patio to eat on. It looks like they've already got some tables set up under the covering over there, but I'm sure they'll be thrilled when it finally reopens. Here's a building, 1000 North Water Street, built, I believe, in the 1990s. I have to say, my grandmother loves it, but I'm not a huge fan. It's a little imposing. I'm not a big fan of the purplish windows, but definitely beats the parking lots that were here before, I'll give you that. I just sort of feel like the 1980s and 90s were not a great time for architecture in downtown Milwaukee. All right, we're making our way back this way, and we're going to end up sort of right back to where we turned off to do the Edison Street section. So I'm probably going to leave you about here. There you can see the Milwaukee Center, built in the late 80s. That's where the St. Kate is attached to that. If you look down there, you can see the 100 East Wisconsin, and just below it in front with the fire escape is where we started. That's the Burnham 735 North Water City Center building. Of course, the 100 East building is sort of a cartoonish postmodern rendering of the gorgeous Salon S. Beeman designed Pabst building that used to stand on that site. It was sort of a tragedy that we lost that building, although the building had been sort of butchered before it got torn down. For the last years of its life, its tower had been sort of chopped off, and it was a sad shell of what it had once been, but God, it was such a beautiful building, and it was so influential in Milwaukee architecture that when Henry Koch used to walk past it on the, he loved the arch and some of the decoration on it so much that it said that he incorporated it into City Hall. If you look at City Hall's arches and some other aspects, they're very reminiscent of that old Pabst building. Anyway, Milwaukee, we're back here at the Slice of Ice. I want to say thanks for joining me. I'm glad the weather's turned nice enough to come back outside. Hope you enjoyed this walk. I'll be back outside next week. Where I'll be, nobody knows yet. And then after that, for a few weeks, I'm going to go back inside briefly to do some walks in the Milwaukee Public Museum, which, as you know, is going to get a replacement in the next few years. So we'll go in and we'll do a few walks inside there, and then after that, I'll be back out on the street again. Talk to you soon. Mask up, be safe, enjoy the beautiful weather. Let's hope it's here to stay, knock wood. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.